All right, here we go. Monday night. PBR Monday. Got some guests tonight. It's going to be a great show. I'm a little bit early here, so I decided to come on just a few minutes early to go ahead and let the room populate, give everybody an opportunity to get in, get logged on. As always, please be sure to follow the StreamYard directions about logging on. That way, when you post comments, which I hope that you will, we'll be able to see a name attached to the comments. If you don't do that, you're watching on Facebook, it just comes in as anonymous Facebook user. So it's better if you follow the directions so we can see who you are. But at any rate, feel free to comment even if we can't see who you are. You can, if you think there's any doubt about it, you can sign your name to the end of the comment or something. So I see that the room is starting to populate. It's been cold here in Idaho. We had a really intense, brief cold front that moved down from the north yesterday, and it got down to 5 degrees here at my house last night, which is the coldest it's ever been in October that I can remember. And it's warming up considerably. It's going to get back up to the 60s this week, but looks like winter may come a little bit early this year. I see one person said howdy. Again, it says Facebook user, so I don't know who that is. If you are concerned that your name's not coming through with the comments, again, you can sign your comment with your name if you want. But if you follow all the StreamYard directions, your name will come up. The Facebook thing isn't perfect, so sometimes people do everything right and they follow all the directions and it still doesn't work, and there's not a lot that anybody can do about that. Let's see where we're at here. I think we should be getting pretty close to the top of the hour. Pardon me. Let's see what we got here. All right. I have 7 o'clock, so we're going to rock it tonight. Again, welcome to PBR Monday, Hot Stove League number 2. We're going to do these things once again all through the winter. We may take a brief break during the holidays. I think I might take a little bit of time off then, but I'm planning on doing these things through most of the winter. Please feel free to answer questions, or excuse me, I'm the one that answers the questions. Please feel free to ask questions tonight. I'll put the ones that look particularly good up on the feed so that I can see them and our guests can see them, and you might get answers from myself or our guests. We do have 2 guests tonight. I have 2 friends of mine from back in Kentucky, Team Hillbilly. They're going to be on here in about 5 minutes, and they're going to talk to you about their 2018 Tour of Idaho T1 attempt, followed by an ultimately successful 2020 attempt just this last summer. 2 great guys. You talk about people that prepare. There have been very, very few teams that I thought did more in the line of preparation than Hillbilly for both attempts. Their first attempt ended mostly due to just plain bad luck, which comes up every once in a while. But you know, Hillbilly is in sort of a rarefied stratum. I think certainly Holy Rollers were another team that came through that was uber prepared, Team Hillbilly, and there have been others, but those 2 names pop out as people that spent a long time really dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, and it paid off when they got there because in terms of what is possible for those teams to have controlled in advance, they did a pretty good job of doing that, and as a result, they were able to have as much fun as they could have. Before I bring these guys on tonight, there are a couple of questions that came up this week that I want to address. One of them is left over again from last week. I apologize that it's difficult to get registered for the forum. It's not my intent to deliberately make it difficult, but we do have the spam controls screwed down pretty tight on the forum for reasons I've gone into before. So if something comes up and you send me a PM or something, I'll try to figure it out. The biggest thing I get is why can't I post on the forum, or why can't I see content on the forum, pictures or something like that? Usually when I look it up, it's because you're not registered for the forum. You have to be registered to view a lot of the content, and you have to be registered certainly to post anything. If you are registered, then you should be able to post, view everything, and if not, then PM me and I'll see if I can figure it out. As I said last week, it helps if you have like an email address that doesn't look funny. If your IP is associated with a lot of spam, it'll flag that, and it probably won't allow you to register. But we can get past all that. If you're having undue trouble, just make sure that you PM me or email me somehow, and we'll get past all that. One thing that's already started to come up is people have a lot of questions, which is good, about next year. As most of you know, I won't release the route till sometime in the new year. Typically, it's all out by March sometime, which gives you 3 or 4 months to get it put together. Neither myself or anybody else asks a thing of any rider that comes here to do the tour in return, except for one thing, and that is please read the information that is on motorcyclejazz.com, that's on the Facebook page, it's in the forum. Spend some time reading through all that stuff before you start asking questions. Now, there's a lot of information there, and even people that are very well read and have really drilled into that stuff will occasionally miss something, and I get all that. And I'm never offended by questions. What I am offended by, and this is pretty well known, is if you show up here and it's pretty clear that you haven't read anything, you really don't understand anything that the Tour of Idaho is all about, then you're wasting my time and a lot of other people's time too. So please make sure that you read as much as possible. Then start asking questions. And I think it goes a lot better if you sit down and read it. This is an adventure that requires that you read some stuff. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot that you know. You can't just download a track from somewhere and get going. This is way more than that. So the reading is a part of it. We actually have an inside joke. Reading is fundamental, a little riff on an old commercial. And it's extremely important that you do read in order to avail yourself of all the information that's out there. There's a lot. Almost every question you can think of is answered somewhere. Once you've gone through everything, if you still can't find an answer to your question, then I or somebody else is more than happy to help you out. Now, a question that I do want to address directly this week that comes up every year, and it's good to be asking that question this time of the year. Again, this is addressed on motorcyclejazz.com, but it's still a good question because the answer is kind of fungible. And a question came up today. A guy PM'd me, real nice guy. In fact, I think he is a friend of our guests. Says he's from back in Kentucky. Asked, what are appropriate bikes for the Tour of Idaho? Well, yeah, that's addressed on Mojazz, and we've talked about it a lot in the forums and stuff, but it's still a good question because bikes change all the time, right? I wrote that stuff and updated it last year. A lot of new bikes available since then. So the macroscopic answer to that question is whatever bike you think you can ride down 2,000 miles of a lot of technical terrain. That suggests, at least to me anyway, you want the lightest street legal bike you can get. So barely legal is good enough. You want something that's got lights. It's got to have a plate on it because it's got to be street legal, because there are transfer sections. There are places where you go through towns and you might have some trouble if you don't have a plate in your bike. I and many others have done the Tour of Idaho on a bike that didn't have plates or just had in Idaho, you have an off-road plate. I've done it with an off-road plate a few times. But it's way better if you have a street legal motorcycle. Now, does it need turn signals? No. It does need a mirror. You need a working brake light, all that kind of good stuff. But any barely street legal bike will work. So that suggests enduro bikes, but enduro is a huge range of motorcycles. You can get enduro bikes that weigh 700 pounds. Those are clearly inappropriate. You want a lightweight enduro motorcycle. And if you spend some time on the forum or you look around the pages of Mojazz, there are a lot of suggestions. KTM 302 strokes are really popular bikes. KTM 500s are really popular bikes. You want the ones that's just barely street legal, which I understand they've started making again this year. There's all kinds of bikes that work. KTM 350s, the Husqvarna, sort of a parallel. They have a parallel universe to KTM, and their bikes seem to be in about the same ranges. All those bikes are wonderful motorcycles. The tour's been completed in all kinds of reasonably lightweight dirt bikes. But once you start getting into heavier dual sports that are more oriented towards street, you're probably not making a very good choice there. Also, you don't want an MX bike for a whole lot of reasons. A bike that doesn't have a headlight, that has got race suspension and stuff like that is wrong for a whole bunch of reasons. So you want a barely legal enduro style motorcycle, engine configurations, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of up to you, whatever you feel good about. I really like the KTM 300. I like the KTM 350. I like the KTM 500 and the Husky equivalents, because the power delivery in those bikes is really good. The suspensions are pretty good out of the box, and you get them pretty close to what you need with a little bit of work. Chassis are really good. They're pretty forgiving, but that's a personal preference for me, and it's going to vary for a lot of people. And the specific question today is, will this particular 250cc 4-stroke motorcycle work? And yeah, it was probably not a bad choice at all. I would like something a little bit bigger for me personally, but I'm also a big dude, and that makes a difference. So there's a range of answers to that question. It's not like one bike is way better than every other bike. It's the lightest, sort of semi-street legal motorcycle that you can get that'll do the trick. You don't need turn signals and dual mirrors and all that kind of stuff. You're starting to add a lot of weight that you might regret, and things that you're just going to break off anyway if you get into too much of that stuff. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. We'll devote a whole show to motorcycles that people have used and the modifications that they made. And I think one of our guests tonight probably has a pretty interesting story about the motorcycle that he chose to use. A little bit on the heavier end of dual sport motorcycles. He's the second person that's completed a tour on this particular bike, but like the first guy, he's a smart guy. He's ridden this bike forever. It is even though it's a little heavy, it otherwise is a pretty good bike for this with certain modifications. And these guys made all those modifications. They did a good job with it. Well, without any further ado, I want to go ahead and bring on our guests. Let me bring them up on the screen right now. Unmute some microphones here. And let me see here. All right. There we go. Almost. Let's see if we can get this. All right. We're going to do it just like this for the time being. And when you guys are talking, I'll bring you up. Can you both hear me?
We can.
All right. All right. So, Team Hillbilly, please introduce yourselves.
My name's Jeff Stess. I'm from about 12 miles outside of Louisville, Kentucky.
Kent Annis. I'm southwest of Lexington, Kentucky, right in the central part of the state.
Are you from Harrodsburg, Kent? Or is that where you're at?
That's where I grew up. I'm about 10 miles north of Harrodsburg and about 12 miles south of Lawrenceburg. So, okay. Yeah, just south of the Bluegrass Park. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So these guys, even though they're from Kentucky, I didn't know them when I was back in Kentucky because that was a long time ago. That was 30 years ago. But our paths have crossed. We know people that know each other and stuff. So when I first heard about these guys a few years ago, I sort of knew of them from friends of friends. And one of the things that I knew about both of these guys is that they're involved in something that's absolutely fantastic called the Kentucky Adventure Tour. So Jeff, I'll throw this at you first. Would you mind telling everybody about the Kentucky Adventure Tour before you start off on Tour of Idaho?
Yeah, the Kentucky Adventure Tour is a 1,000-mile loop around eastern Kentucky, and it happens to dip into Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia as well. It kind of got started after I rode the Trans-America Trail in 2007, and I got to thinking the whole time, well, not everybody can take 2 weeks off and have the logistics of at least if you live on the East Coast, of getting your bike all the way back from Oregon back to somewhere on the East Coast. So I got to thinking, most people can take a week and do it. So, but from riding in Eastern Kentucky, I knew that I could put together a week's ride that made a loop, that you didn't have to worry about logistics on getting your bike back. So after about 6 years of a lot of map study and doing trial and error rides, we put something together. And it's a constantly evolving route as well. It's not something that's kind of set in stone, kind of like the Tour of Idaho. It changes a lot. Usually for if I found something new that'll get into the dirt, taking some blacktop out and get more dirt in, or sometimes we just have to change it for legal reasons. But yeah, it's not nearly as hard as the the Tour of Idaho, but it does have a main loop, and it does have optional hard sections, kind of like challenge sections in the Tour of Idaho. It can be done on bigger bikes, unlike the Tour of Idaho, but you really need to be a very good rider on a big bike and have full dirt tires. So it's not an easy ride by any means, but it's more difficult than the Trans-America Trail or a BDR. It's kind of in the middle. It's kind of between Tour of Idaho and a BDR or Trans-America Trail ride.
Jeff, tell them how many days it takes to make the loop.
It depends on how fast you ride. When I've done it a few times, I tend to do it without stopping to smell the roses. It takes me about 5 days. Some other people, 7 or 8 days. Just depends on, if you want to stop and tour around, like in Red River Gorge, or there's really a lot of places along it that are very tourist friendly. Matewan, West Virginia is where the Hatfield McCoy feuds happen, and there's just all kinds of places like that along the tour along the loop that you can stop and really enjoy it.
And how long is it? The big loop?
It's probably 1,000 miles, depending on the whether you take hard loop. But yeah, roughly about 1,000.
Well, I haven't had the opportunity to do the Kentucky Adventure Tour because it came along a long time after I left Kentucky. But an interesting story that I've told before is the inspiration for the Tour of Idaho is actually part of what is now the Kentucky Adventure Tour. There's a trail in eastern Kentucky that goes the length of the Daniel Boone National Forest down into Tennessee called the Sheltowee Trace.
That's right.
And in 1989 and 1990, with 3 friends of mine, we rode that on our mountain bikes. And it took freaking forever. We actually started a little bit north because we wanted to get as close to the Ohio River as we could. But we rode the whole Sheltowee Trace. We drug our bike through rhododendron thickets, dropped them off sandstone cliffs. It was like the most miserable 8 days of my life, but we made it. And you incorporate parts of what we did in the Kentucky Adventure Tour, do you not?
Yeah, so the Sheltowee is primarily a hiking trail, but there are sections that are open to motorized use. So we do take advantage of it where we can legally.
Yeah, there's a lot of it, especially once you get kind of out of the gorge area, like right in back of once you get down to
Beattyville.
Even before Beattyville, like once you get down to Slade, isn't that old railroad bed that goes through the fort?
Yes. So yeah, we call that Hard 11.
Yeah.
Old railroad bed. It's almost completely consumed by kudzu. It's like something out of the Vietnam jungle is what it reminds you of.
When I rode that, we rode that on our mountain bikes. I used to have that little store there on the road. And we're about 5 miles from my store riding down that railroad bed. I'll never forget this. And all that kudzu and stuff, you can't see anything. And I'm riding along, and all of a sudden, my front wheel just disappeared. And there was a hole that was probably 20 inches wide and about 5 feet deep, and it sheared off by forks. So I had to ride a friend of mine's bike. I had to borrow a bike, ride over to my store, get a fresh set of forks, make a trailside repair in order to continue on. All right. So website where people can find out more information about this, or a place on the internet?
Yeah. So there's a Facebook group. You can find it just by searching Kentucky Adventure Tour, or you can get it on actually Kent's blog site. What's the address of that, Kent?
You can do https annisky.net/KAT. We can post it in the chat.
So either one of those, you can download the GPX files. Facebook group's very active.
Okay, and I'll have these fellows post those in the comments section below this when it's all done, so that those of you who come back and check on this later, you can just follow the link directly from the comment section. So let's fast forward a few years. How'd you guys find out about the Tour of Idaho? And let's start talking about how you found out about it, your 2018 attempt, and then on to 2020.
Well, Kent turned me on to it, so you can take it away.
Yeah, my wife's family's from Idaho, so my first trip out there was in the early 2000s, and my first trip that I brought a motorcycle was in 2008. And during those years, obviously I rode a lot of nice trails. but I kept coming across all these photos, and these people would post these things about the tour of Idaho. And I'd say, hey, I've ridden there. I know where that trail is. And most of that stuff was on days 3, 4, and 5. But after, looking at that and kind of interested in it, I met this guy named Randy Block. And Randy Block is, I think, finisher 54 and did it in 2015. And he said, Kent, you really ought to try this. So I was talking with Randy about it and got really interested, and reached out to Jeff and said, we ought to try this sometime. So 2018 was the first year we gave it a go. And it's been an interesting experience. It's, as a lot of people can attest, you kind of get looped into it, and you really don't want to let go of this idea of being able to finish it. I think we kind of both latched onto it and took it from there. But I think the interesting thing, and Martin brought this up, and I swear I probably read his post there on motorcyclejazz.com, I don't know, several times, and I read it all the way through, and I'm like, this is a lot more than you think it is, because I understood what this terrain was about. And Martin's right. If you don't read all those details and you don't soak that in, you're going to show up unprepared, and to a significant degree. So, Jeff, just talk a little bit about how long we had to spend just doing the mapping itself, and each one of us realized each one of us did this separately. So how long do you think you spent in 2018 each day and then mapping out the whole thing?
I mean, we started planning, we watched it the year before, and I think we started planning right after that tour ended in 17. So it's almost a whole year of planning. Mapping wise, like he said, we each did our own mapping and then would compare them and to see where we differed, and we would figure out those complications where we did. But I know each day I probably spent 8 to 10 hours per day of the tour. So in 2018, that's 90 hours of mapping time. Of course, when it came to 2020, it was much easier because we knew where we were. Maybe that time passed, but yeah, that's not unheard of. If you're not at least an 8-hour per day of a map study, doing flyovers with Google Earth, you're probably doing yourself a lot of not doing it enough justice, if you will. It's a lot of planning. Spend the most time on not bike prep, but actual mapping is where you need to spend time. Very important.
Yeah, reading, mapping.
If I can interject for a second, those of you out there listening to this maybe don't understand that these fellas come at this with some expertise that's extremely uncommon. Kent, why don't you tell everybody a little bit what you do? And then, Jeff, I would like for you to fill people in on what you do in terms of your motorcycle background, too, because these guys aren't just two goobers that showed up and said, hey, this looks like a lot of fun. These guys have some background that's serious in this kind of stuff. Their qualifications to do things like this run very deep. So I know you guys are pretty modest, so I'll have to beat it out of you, which is what I'm doing right now. Kent, let's start with you. Tell them what you do for a living.
Well, I'm actually the GIS director for the state of Kentucky. So GIS is the Geographic Information System. So essentially, myself and my wife, who's my partner in crime here, manage all the state's mapping data. So needless to say, I can read a map, I can navigate, I can create my own maps. But unfortunately, as you see, I have these glasses on, I can't see my handlebars without them. So it's very important that I have somebody like Jeff who knows what north, south, east, and west are and has explored, thousands of miles of roads in eastern Kentucky and can navigate just about anywhere. So I come at it from that perspective. I also ran the promoted and did all the trails for the Kentucky Off-Road Hare Scramble series for nearly a decade. So, know my way around the woods and the trails, and can read a map. But I'm not as fast as Jeff, so I'll let Jeff fill in the blanks on his level of expertise.
So I have a real long racing background, but that has nothing to do with the Tour of Idaho. I was always interested in GPSs and mapping. It was just something that fascinated me. I honestly wish I went into the field like Kent did. But yeah, doing the Trans-America Trail was a lot. I've done some navigational racing before, and just building the Kentucky Adventure Tour is where I learned most of how to build a map and how to lay it out. Just something I really enjoy doing, and you almost have to for the Tour of Idaho. You really got to get a map study because that's a big part of it.
So what I'm hearing here is I have two guys, one of whom is a GIS specialist for the state of Kentucky, not a slacky whatsoever. His partner has put on one of the greatest rides in North America, done all the mapping, done all the route planning. And what I'm hearing from both of you guys is that it behooves anybody, even people as well qualified as you, to spend some time reading and make sure you can digest all the information. And Jeff, didn't you say 8 to 10 hours per day is what you recommended?
That's what I spent the first year out.
So what do you estimate the odds of success are for somebody that shows up here that has spent 0 hours in map study and hadn't read anything on the website?
0.
There you go. But it happens every year. I mean, you guys are part of this, so we saw it this year, right? People that showed up, and it was pretty clear that they didn't know anything about the rules or how it all works. Those people are not successful, and then they get angry. It's like, well, you screwed us. No, you screwed you. This is an adventure that you participate in many ways besides riding your motorcycle, and part of it is what you do in advance. And these two guys did a lot of that. In the prefacing remarks, Team Hillbilly was one of the most ruthlessly well-prepared teams that ever showed up. And I can only think of one other team. I'm sure there are others, but Holy Rollers come to mind as the other team that had spent as much time as these guys had spent sort of figuring it all out. So tell us about 2018.
2018, man, that's the love year. We actually it was actually going really well. At the end of we got through day one, fairly good time. We got to, and Martin gave us a heads up that it was looking like it was getting really cold up north. I think a team at that point had to bail out from near hypothermia. So we weren't quite prepared for that cold. We did on our day off. I bought an extra down jacket to go underneath my thin jacket that I had. But come to find out on starting on day 6, the cold was one thing, but when you rain and mid 30-degree temperatures, it bit us. It bit us hard on day 7. We woke up the morning of day 7 in pouring rain and cold, and go ahead.
So tell me a little bit more about that. So day 7 that year was Lowell to Laksha Lodge.
Correct.
And Kent, if I'm not mistaken, you didn't accompany Jeff on day 7. Is that right?
No, we left on day 7 together. We got up to Fish Butte Trail. And by that point, we'd probably stopped 3 or 4 times just to try to dry our gloves out and to stay warm, to stay out of the precipitation. By the time we got there, I literally couldn't feel my hands. Now, Martin will tell you that anybody that uses grip heaters is not worthy. But let me tell you, grip heaters, you see, okay. So Jeff's hands were warm. The backs of his hands were wet, but at least, his hands worked. So Jeff said, hey, I'm going on. And I should have gone on at that point, especially being the map guy. And especially, I should have really realized where I was. If I had ridden about another 10 miles, my trip to where I was going to quit that night or where I was going to end up that night would have been a lot shorter. But instead, I backtracked on a bunch of Forest Service roads, and Jeff went on out Fish Butte Trail and probably got another, I'm guessing, 20 plus miles in, Jeff. And then I'll let you kind of pick it up there with what happened when you got to Ant Hill.
Well, yeah, I finished out the Fish Butte Trail, and then I tried Sherman Creek, but about 100 yards in, there was a tree down laying on an angle across a single track that there's no way I could got it over by myself. So I turned around and went back and went in Fish Creek Trail. And if you've never rode that, that's an experience in itself. A lot of the trail you just can't even see because there's so many ferns hanging over it. But I made it to Ant Hill. The first 4 switchbacks, at least in 2018, were not too awful bad. But after like the 4th or 5th one, it was basically completely washed flat. So there was no defined flat spot for your tires to ride on. So I leaned the bike over and I found me a big stick and I dug a line around that switchback. Then I went to pick the bike back up to give it a shot, and it was just cranking. It wouldn't start. So I figured I'd kind of find out so much water had gotten the ignition switch had shorted it out. And I couldn't just clip the wires in hot start because that switch has a anti-theft device in it. So there's no way you can bypass it. So basically had to coast it back to the bottom of the hill, and then about 8 miles back out to the highway where I met a forestry, a fish and wildlife guy that was in that Fish Creek River there, and he ended up giving me a ride to the lodge. But I think by that time it was 11 o'clock that night. But yeah, that was an adventure in itself.
So that had to be a bitter disappointment.
Very.
You guys had, again, I was completely convinced you make. In fact, you guys were one of the first teams ever to mess up my track record of saying, yeah, these guys are going to make it, and they make it, and they don't. So it was a shock to all of us and a disappointment to you. But you know what? That stuff happens, right? It's bad luck. You can't plan for the weather. And in Idaho, as Jeffrey Jensen found out this year, it can turn on a dime. It can be 100 degrees and you can be sweating and getting ready to die of heat prostration. You go over the next pass and all of a sudden it's raining and 35 degrees and you're fighting off hypothermia. And you guys encountered some of that. It was just plain bad luck. So you went back to Kentucky and tell us about the 2 years. You thought about it for a while and what happened between 2018 and 2020.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, we decided 2019 wasn't the year to try it again. And, at that point in time, we and I think we both agreed that was really the hardest thing we'd ever done, physically from a riding perspective. But I can tell you it was definitely the hardest thing I've ever done from a mental perspective. And I don't think that most people can wrap their heads around that part of it. It's tough physically, but to wrap your head around mentally what you have to do 14, 15, 16, 17 hours a day on the bike, that many days in a row, is tough. And it took me a few months to even decompress from it and even really want to seriously consider it again. But we did. And
it was about 6 months after we finished before we decided for sure that we were going to give it another go.
Yeah. And then the prep started. We watched everybody do it in 2019. We committed to do it in 2020. We downloaded the new waypoints and we started the whole process again. But like Jeff said, we were a little better prepared and there was enough overlap from the 2018 route and the 2020 route that helped save us a little time. But Martin did add another day in there. And the day Martin added, day number 6, the new day 6, was interesting, was challenging within itself. So not only did he up it, a couple 100 miles, but he added another day as well, and that was just a whole other part of the prep is wrapping that into the overall package. So
let me ask you a question. So you guys, you observed for a year before you showed up the first time. Then you spent, a couple of years. You took a year off watching people do it. From your perspective, as a team that had been here, and at a certain point you knew you were coming back, so you're watching people. Everybody compares themselves to what other people have done. What were some things that you saw teams do that you said that ain't going to work? Or I should say, did you see things like that? I mean, when you were watching this, as we all do, were there some things that you saw that you were just shaking your head going, I don't know what those guys are thinking?
You can. I think you can pick a lot of that out just by watching people's beacons on day one. How often they head up the wrong trail. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't realize it. Turning around and coming back. I've seen some bikes that looked like they were over. Gosh, what do you think of, Kent?
Well, just everything you said there, and then folks would post. You could tell by people's questions. You could see somebody would post a video. Oh, I'm out training for the Tour of Idaho. Here's my bike, and you could look at some of that stuff and just kind of shake your head, knowing that probably wasn't going to pan out for them. And one of Martin's things he preaches, and he's right about this, is ride light. And that's hard. That's hard to do. It really, really is. I overthink things and I over prepare. And so it's really hard for me to shed a lot of weight. And I'll tell you, both times after day one, I shed a few things. Yeah. And I know I started out the second time with even less than I started out with the first time. So you can't, you have to look at everything. I've got a friend that's an elk hunter, and he weighs his bags that are going to go on these horses before they go up in the mountains. And they look at the weight of everything. And I promise you, that is important. You might not think it is, but you drag that shit around for 9-10 days, and it does become very, very important.
As you guys know, my background's mountaineering, where, shedding weight is just a ruthless endeavor because you got to drag every ounce all the way to the top of whatever you're getting up. And every step you take, every time, that pack wants to go back and forth like that, it's energy that you have to burn. And I'm the same way. I'm just, I cut labels off of things. I drill holes in my tools. I do crazy stuff to keep the weight down. But if you're going to ride 2,000 miles over 10 days, every ounce you put on there is energy that you have to burn. And it's energy that you burn in ways that you wouldn't imagine either. You think, well, it's on the bike. The bike's doing most of the work. Man, you got to steer that bike. You got to lean it back and forth. So it's more than just picking it up off the ground when you drop it, which you probably will a few times. It's the fact that every time you go to make a direction change, every time the suspension responds, so your energy goes into making that happen. And the more that bike weighs, the more it's going to sap your energy after a while. And for those of you that are listening, the biggest thing you could do to make yourself successful right now is think about how I'm not taking anything that's not directly related to making that bike go down the trail, and survival, not comfort, survival if things go wrong. I've had people show up with pillows before. Yeah, if I got to sleep on the ground, man, I want a pillow. Probably. You're probably not making it if you're carrying a pillow, and your mind's definitely not wrapped around the thing. You can spend the night out just fine one night, as long as it's not raining or snowing or something. Sleep in your helmet and put on all of your stuff, wear your boots and everything. It's not going to be great, but you're going to be able to get through the night, and that's what you want to do. You just want to get through it. You don't need to worry about being comfortable. You just need to get through it. And the second time, you guys' bikes were a lot lighter. I noticed that myself. Well, you showed up here last summer, it looked like they'd all gone on a diet.
Yeah, we did.
We lost a few things.
So another thing that I think it kind of changed a little bit is day one was a little bit different this time around too, wasn't it?
Day one is the
The
real. Yeah, I think in 18, I think day one took us. Oh gosh, do you remember, Ken? It was probably
11 hours maybe.
Yeah, this time it was 16, and other than a few transfer sections back and forth across the interstate, it's hardcore stuff, man. It's nothing to sneeze at. Kent's Canyon.
Yeah, my canyon sucks, man.
Yeah. It's if you can't start by no later than 3 a.m. and get done by 10, 11 o'clock, man, you might want to start rethinking. Yeah.
Yeah. That stuff on the west side of the interstate, man. It's the filter.
Yeah.
And, day one in itself's tough enough, but you add that stuff on the west side of the interstate in there, and it really ups the game quite a bit. I think Martin was smart to include it, but it's a whole nother level.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when I first started adding that stuff on, all my friends around here, you know, got in my wheelhouse a little bit about it. They said, look, dude, this thing's already hard enough. Are you trying to kill people right out of the chute? And I said, no, we're trying to, but if we're going to do it, we need to do it where they're close to a hospital. Because what day one does, as you guys know, I mean, it's a filter now. If you can get through day one in a reasonable amount of time, you have a reasonable expectation of success along the rest of the way. Because I don't know that I think there's a day that's harder. There are some days that are as hard.
Yeah.
There are certainly some days I think that are mentally harder because day one, you're always relatively close to something. You can see the freeway most of the time. So even if something goes wrong, you know you're relatively close to help. You get there into like day 7 and day 8, and even like day 6, you know, you're kind of a long way from help. Day 5, you're a long way from help if things go wrong. So day one is designed deliberately to be a filtering mechanism. And but that was something that changed between when you guys did it the first time and the second time. But
yeah,
you got here in really good time, so it didn't slow you guys down that much.
It felt like it did. Yeah, you know, don't leave that hotel any later than 3 a.m. there in the WAD. If you leave any later than that, you're really risking being able to finish that day before midnight.
Yeah.
And stop and get a burger.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you got to stop in McCammon and get the burger. It's worth it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So in the last couple of years, we've started adding just like some fun bonus sections and things like that. Some ways that you can get yourself a couple extra challenge points in case a fire crops up or a trail's closed for some reason, or you just can't get through it because it hasn't been sawed. We started adding a lot of bonus sections, and they're kind of front loaded. There's a lot of them early on that are fairly easy to get. And one of them is maybe a 45-minute side trip into McCammon to get the best hamburger in the planet.
Yep. Pick up a point.
Chip Bonchon bus at the Little Rock Cafe. Those are the best hamburgers in the world.
I agree.
So you guys got to Pocatello. You made it here in pretty good time. There wasn't any trouble with that. So let's go on and let's talk about the rest of the tour, day 2, through day 10. Take it away.
Well, first, if you're thinking that you don't need to take the day off in Pocatello, you do. You really do. You need that day for rest, number one, and you need to you're probably going to be making a little adjustment to your bike, like Kent and I did, unloading some of that stuff out of the backpack that you just don't need that's been weighing you down. And to get the auxiliary challenge points as well. You really need all that time to do that. But day 2 is pretty. We had done challenge section on day 2 in 2018. It's not a tough one at all. It only takes you about 45 minutes, but it's adding 45 minutes. Basically, where you start and where you end it is at the same point. So you're just adding a big loop. I think Martin mentions this, but only do it if it's not going to be terribly hot later in the afternoon to get to the desert. And in both 18 and 20, we lucked out on day 2 on the heat. I think it was only in the low 90s for both years that we did it. Maybe even 18 might have been in the 80s. But yeah, that was pretty uneventful. You know, you get through all the mountains in the morning, then into Arco, and hopefully by lunch or 1 o'clock maybe. And then out in the desert, I know you've got more plans for next year about doing a special navigation challenge out in the desert. It sounds like a lot of fun if it's not 105 degrees. But yeah, it went pretty well. Kent, actually, he got a fork seal leaking on day 2 that kind of worried us there for a little bit. But the DJ said a little prayer for us, and that fork seal made it to Sunset Mountain.
Yeah. It needed a lot of help, and I don't think there was any oil left in that side once we got done. But I had one of these koozie cups here that we cut open and wrapped around the fork, and then zip tied it on, and that kept the brake fluid off of the disc and the rotor and the pads, and so that let us get through. But I'm not a fan of the desert. I'm not a fan of the sand, and the lava rock sucks.
I want you to put your hands together, brothers and sisters, and I want you to pray for that fork seal, because that's the only way them two knuckleheads get the fork seal.
If it hadn't been for that, we wouldn't have made it to our count.
Excuse me.
Day 3 was great. Stuff that was on the east side that we didn't ride in 18. Got a real early start. That's the key, everyone, is getting an early start. Yeah, you're tired, and it sucks when that alarm clock goes off, but it pays off. But another long day. I think we made it into the Smoky Bar around 5:30 or so, and Caitlin had an awesome dinner for us, spaghetti and a cucumber salad. But I can't remember anything on day 3 that other than some really, really fun single track. I don't think we had any real issues that day or anything.
Day 3 is pretty good. That's when you get into the first good single track. Like I said, we had good accommodations. Day 4 was a lot longer than it was in 2018 and a lot longer than we anticipated. Day 4 ended up being one of our longer days, and that is some of the most familiar area to me. I've ridden a lot of those trails over the years, many, many times, but even with that familiarity, just the length of it and some of the technicality of it, it took us a long time, and that was one of our longer days. So day 5, we had to cut short in 2018 because of a fire. So day 5 was somewhat of a treat because we got to see some things we hadn't seen before. But, on the beginning of day 9, there's this place called the Rock Garden. Well, let me tell you, it ain't got nothing on some of the rocks that you encounter midday on day 5. So the Rock Garden may sound bad on day 9, but midday on day 5, yeah, that's some real shit right there, fellas. So the good part about day 5 is it's short. We got in early. We got our rear tires changed. We got a good meal. We got in bed early. But as Jeff said, almost every morning, our alarm was set for 4 or 4:30. Every single morning. And I can tell you, on most days, we would get in maybe as early as 6 or 7, but you're spending a lot of time in the saddle, so you got to prepare. And then day 6 was new. In the morning of day 6, when we came down Panther Creek Road and we hit the South Fork of the Salmon there, we had to get off the bikes and walk around. That was the first day when we realized we were actually nodding off and starting to get really, really tired. And we were going to fall asleep on the bikes, essentially. So we were really tired that day. And that's when the fatigue really started to set in.
It was really cold that morning, too. Real cold. Up our bags off.
Evidently, we did really good on navigation that day. I think what Martin said, we're one of the few people, if maybe the only people, that navigated up through the Powder Gulch area successfully. And beautiful country. You're right on the Montana-Idaho line. We ran into a neat guy that was hiking up there that day. The people at North Fork really took care of us. We had all our meals and stuff waiting for us when we got back to the room. but we got rained on, we got hailed on, we both got submerged up to our waists in water in a creek, and we ended the day very wet and cold.
And Powder Gulch is a really good example of why you don't want to use tracks. Tracks are absolutely worthless in the area. That's one of the reasons why I think Martin really struggles to navigate by waypoints and not tracks, because I don't care what map set you use, the maps are never right. I mean, some places they are, a lot of places they aren't, and if you try to navigate with tracks, it can come back to bite you. And Powder Gulch is why most of the teams wasn't able to navigate through there properly. And unfortunately for Team Armadillo, ended their tour, I think, for that very reason, if I'm not mistaken, right? Is that right?
Yeah, Powder Gulch broke a lot of people's hearts. Now, a lot of people got through it, but I had to ding them a challenge point or two because, you know, they hit the road and then just, you know, they didn't navigate from waypoint to waypoint, which is what we told everybody to do. It's a real confusing area because it's a maze of logging roads, and there is some trail tread there, but you can get lost because it goes all over the place. But if you just follow the path of least resistance from one waypoint to the other, you make it over no problem. And you guys were the only team that got every single waypoint in Powder Gulch this year. Congratulations. And I think, again, it speaks to the particular skill set that you guys have, where I think you both realize the limitations of tracks and GPS and base maps, which are rarely 100% accurate over big areas.
We called it Pokemon Go on a motorcycle.
We wandered around up there for a good 45 minutes, but we finally did it.
But you got through it, and that's what that was the thing that stressed me about you guys a little bit as I was watching you, because you rode past a really easy challenge point that morning, because you can ride up a variant any day you want to, and day 6 is far and away the easiest day to do that, because it's like 10 minutes difference if you ride the 3-person variant rather than the 2. And I didn't tell anybody that. I just said, well, you know, if you read enough, you'll figure it out. And some people did. Some people just missed it. But you guys rode right past that, and I said, whoops, because I'd forgotten that you had gone to Little Rock Cafe and that you had one spare challenge point in your back pocket. And so, you know, it's hard from PLB resolution to see exactly what you're doing. That's why we require tracks. Even though, Jeff, you did something that was really good. You had your PLB, I think, set to 2-minute resolution, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah. You can do that with some plans, and you don't have to pay any extra money.
Yeah. But that's something really important on the morning of day 2. And that's kind of why we skipped that section. Ken, if you want to tell that story.
What's that? On the morning
What happened? Day 2.
On the morning of day 2?
Yeah, going through that gate.
Yeah. It was pitch dark. One of those up and over things, one of those gates. And Jeff goes through there, and he doesn't go up and over. He goes through the gate. So I whizzed through there.
I didn't see the up and over. I just saw the man gate.
And my foot peg caught the edge of the gate, and it slammed me to the ground in an instant. Pinned me underneath the bike, up against the gate, slammed my wrist, hit a big post, pinned under my bike. Luckily, I had my scent on. I'm yelling at Jeff. He comes and gets me. But my wrist pretty much plagued me the rest of the time. And it wasn't until the evening of day 5 that I was able to get to a store and get something to wrap my wrist up. But I was filling up my drink system every night with ice and going to sleep with the drink system on my wrist, so I wouldn't wake up with it swollen.
So that kind of leads us to why we didn't take that, if you will, heavy point by riding the 3-person route that day. Is because at that point we were looking for the path of least resistance to keep his wrist was bad. So that's the whole reason we again.
I thought you just missed it.
No, we originally that was part of the plan, but the way it was bothering him, especially coming out of a trail that was real rocky or something like that, we just figured we just do what we got to do to get to the end of the day as quick as possible if we could get that thing iced up.
So you get to the end of day 6 and you roll into North Fork, where they treat you really well. They typically have a burrito sitting in your room if you go too late or something.
About 8:15, so we just missed them closing. But they had our meals in our rooms waiting, and that was great. Those people there were so cool.
One of the things that you're going to find out is when you meet these people along the way, like Kaylin down at Smoky Bar Store, and all those folks that run North Fork, all these people along the way, they really dig what you guys are doing. And when you show up there, you're going to get a lot of love and respect. People will treat you really well along the way. I don't know anybody that's ever – now, occasionally, we did have an incident this year at Smoky Bars – or not at Smoky Bar, at North Fork, where somebody got fussed out a little bit. I think it might have even been over a mask or a photo or something like that. But that was Jeff Jensen, and his karma probably brought that on all by itself. But so you guys get there, your meal's in your room. You're more than halfway through. You've gotten through the thing that you didn't know anything about, which is day 6. So now you got day 7, 8, 9, 10's pretty easy. What's going on in your mind now that you're getting pretty close to what put a spike in your heart in 2018?
Yeah, the moment that I thought we might actually be able to do this is when we got the locks before dark on day 8. When we got through Sherman Creek, which was a really, really tough trail, it was worth the shortcut.
But it's a lot of work.
Early on that particular day, that's when I started to think that, yeah, maybe this is going to work out. Maybe we can get there this time. But it wasn't until then that I you can't get too confident. I promise you cannot be too confident.
Talk to us a little bit about Sherman Creek. You guys did that, and you took the shortcut, which cuts like 40 miles off your day. So it is well worth it. But I think it's worth talking about Sherman Creek in a little bit of detail. First of all, you're going up it, which is a completely different experience than going down it. Going down, it's not too bad. As long as you don't mind the side hill exposure, which crops up at a few spots. But would you mind spending a few minutes talking about the technical and physical difficulties of Sherman Creek Trail? Because I think that's a hard trail, but I have people all the time telling me I'm a wuss.
Yeah, no, it's not easy by any means. It takes physical labor. I guess the first hard spot is the rock section, I think, was what a lot of people remember most. And it's
Beersburg boulders is what we called it.
It's boulders, yeah, and they're wet. They typically have between them. The right side is straight up. The left side is almost straight down. So, you can try to ride through there, but, if you made a mistake, like you've seen the Jimmy Lewis video, even as good a rider as he is, he fumbled off that. Fortunately for him, he had enough strength to get that bike back by himself. But, we played it safe. I went first, and I was on the bike, but Kent would, be rolling the front tire or helping me get the back end over. And, it just took teamwork to get through that. Trying to ride it on your own, that just seems a little crazy because, you could be seriously hurt. But once you get through that, it's maybe 100 yards of that, 50, 100 yards of it. Then after that, we ran into a lot of down trees. A couple of them, we had to literally drag the bikes underneath. A few of them we had to go over them, or in places you could get off the side and get over them. But like Kent's worth the effort to not do Fish Creek Trail and that whole 40 miles around there. Fish Creek and Ant Hill. I think it may be maybe equally as hard as Sherman. Maybe not. It depends on what kind of shape Ant Hill is. And, we haven't been there since 18, so I don't know. I think the one young fellow did it this year. And I never really used his rope actually to get up.
Yeah.
So I think either way you're going to work for it.
I haven't done either of them in several years either, but I did both of them the same year. And my impression was they're both hard. The difference is Ant Hill is just hard. Sherman Creek is hard, and there's some exposure there. So on Ant Hill, the worst that's going to happen is you're going to tumble back down to the switchback below you. At Sherman Creek, there's a possibility of getting really hurt. and of potentially putting your bike in a situation where I don't think it'd be very easy to retrieve.
Right.
There's some big time exposure. That's the technical hard spot, but there's still some exposed spots on there. It's like all that stuff up in that area. There's some steep side hilling. So it reminded me a lot of like the Fish Butte Trail, where even in the sections where it's kind of easy, you got to be paying attention to that big drop off to the rider's left as you're going up Sherman Creek.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very good way to put it.
You guys, so you come across, you get out on a Windy Ridge, you get up on Windy Bill. My understanding is that some of that trail, some of Windy Bill had been brushed this year. Is that correct? But not all of it. Like it was hard to find for a ways. Then all of a sudden it was easy to find is what I heard.
Yeah, it was fun for us. That trail flows really well. But the hill you're talking about was completely brushed. So that was a lot of fun to climb that. We were having a good time flying up that hill where I can see before how narrow it was and however grown it used to be. It would have probably been a real challenge, but now it's actually a blast.
Yeah. So you get into Loksha, and the secret of the Tour of Idaho is if you can get to Loksha, you probably got it made, because day 9 is difficult, but it is definitely not as difficult as day 8 was. It's long, but most teams are still getting into to see Donna around 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of transfer section on. So how'd you feel riding day 9, knowing that once you get through Lundy Ridge, you kind of got it nailed?
Yeah. Let's see. Gosh, it's all blur, but yeah, we were really close to some wolves on day 9, right before going up the switchbacks. Those are a big challenge. That last switchback is a 2-person affair. And then once you get to the top of that, a lot of rocks, single track. And then, gosh, what's after that, Clint?
Well, State Line's a beautiful area, beautiful trail, very brutal. It's not that easy, but the scenery is wonderful. And in my mind, I thought, once I get through here, I've got it. And we got to Stevens Peak, and I banged a breakdown. I thought, this is it. I called you every name in the book, Martin. And I was just about to freaking lose it when we got to Stevens Peak. And
we were mentally shot. We were mentally shot.
Yeah, I don't care why.
What's wrong with it?
But I just about lost it in that section right there. Now, we probably got in at 5:30, something like that. We got in early. We did well, but
it was a hard day.
I was that just about did me in.
All right, so those way up north guys made me put that stuff on there. So you got to talk to the Stafford brothers and those guys. They're the ones. You got to put this on there, man. This trail is awesome, and you've always left it off. That trail, the first time I ever rode that, it probably took me 5 hours to get through there. And the Stevens Peak part wasn't the hardest. I mean, I noticed the exposure. But that little trail, right when you get to St. Paul Pass, where we used to go down the road where the bicycles go, and now we go up, and it starts out as kind of a quad trail that wanders around up there. That trail used to have ruts that were 4 feet deep, and there was one downhill in it with a V-shaped rut that I could not reach up and touch the top of like that. You went down this thing like 100 feet. It was probably 30 degrees or something like that. It was just nuts, and it was all overgrown, and you couldn't find it. And then those guys went up there and cut all that stuff out. And so they kind of forced me to put it on there. It wasn't my fault. That's what I'm saying.
We did have I had a pretty big scare on day 9. We were going down a gravel road, just 35, 40 miles an hour. And all of a sudden my back tire locked up. And I thought, man, that's it. My motor locked up or something. Pulled over to the side, and come to find out, 2 of the bolts that held my chain guide on had sheared off. And then I guess one bolt backed out, sheared off. So my chain guide went over top of the sprocket and jammed up against the swing arm of the frame and completely locked that rear wheel up. So it didn't hurt anything. I just had to take the chain guide apart and get it off of there. But that was a really scary moment right there. and I thought it was over behind me, but yeah, that stunk.
All right, so you roll into Wallace. You got to see, and you stayed at. It turned out you ended up staying at with Donna, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. We did.
Okay.
She's
So,
awesome.
Day 10, there's not a lot on day 10. The single track that's there is kind of fun and pretty casual. But what did it feel like rolling up to Sundance after waiting 3 or 4 years to do it?
Oh my gosh, it was surreal. It's hard to explain. You know, it had been so dusty. Kent was riding quite a ways behind me out of the dust, and he was about a half mile from the top. Said, "Kent, you got to ride up next to me. We're crossing this line together, and we're going to get it on video." And yeah, it's hard to explain when you get up there. You know, you just got to kind of decompress and look around. It's a great feeling. It really is.
By the way, they mentioned video. I'm not much of a video person myself, but these guys have the best collection of Tour of Idaho videos anywhere in the universe. Their videos are the quality is excellent, the narration is excellent. And even though I'm not much of a video guy, I do watch their videos because it's kind of funny. They say things out loud that I think almost all of us are thinking in the same spot, which I find hilarious. It makes it, even for a guy like me that's not a particular video guy, I want to recommend to everybody that you track down their videos. And again, I'll ask you guys to post links in the comments section later so that everybody can find this stuff pretty easily. But Ken, I'm sorry I interrupted you, bud.
Oh, no. Like Jeff said, just finishing is, even at that point in time, it was hard to take it all in. And, it took many days for it to set in. And the other thing is, mentally, it took a long time to decompress. But I'll be honest, I didn't get full use of my hands back for about 2.5 or 3 weeks. And I think if I didn't spend all day on a keyboard on a computer, it might even have been longer. But my hands and wrists, it took a while to get back to normal, and just to get my head back to normal. It puts you in a different state of mind. I can tell you that.
I have people ask me all the time, "Are those the hardest you've ever rode?" My answer is no, but it's the most physically and mentally challenging thing and exhausting thing that I've ever done. Ken and I have both ridden harder trails, but not those types of trails for 12 to 17 hours a day. And that's what it's down to is our shortest day was 12 hours and our longest day was 17. So just all in one big bundle, it is the most physically and mentally challenging thing that I've ever done.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, you don't get any support on this, so you're out there on your own. You got to carry everything with you. It's not like there's a sag wagon waiting for you at every intersection with a fresh change of clothes and all the food and stuff. You got to carry everything. You are completely on your own while you are out there, except when you roll into a town at the end of the day. And the mental part of it, which both of you have spoken to me is harder than the physical part. I'm not a great dirt just in terms of the ability to ride a motorcycle. This is what's the hardest part for me. Yeah. Because it beats the crap out of you. So you got to convince yourself to keep going.
Yeah.
You hit these transfer sections and you're looking at the map and hey, there's a hotel 30 miles down this paved road. I can be there in 30 minutes and it can all be over. And you got to not do that, man. You got to instead go up the road 30 feet, get back on the next single track and punish yourself for another 6 or 7 hours. You got to carry all your own stuff. If something goes wrong, if Jeff found out, you got to walk out in the rain pushing your bike sometimes.
Yeah.
It's all on you, and that's what makes this thing unique. And from where I sit, I think the mental part of it is tougher than the physical part for me. It's being able to wrap your mind around what you got to be able to do and just have the sheer determination that I'm not going to quit.
Yeah, and Kent kind of brought it up earlier, but on day 7, when you're riding that 100-long Magruder corridor, we were both literally nodding off. We kept having to talk to over our semis, trying to keep each other awake and stopping and doing jumping jacks or something. It's exhausting. It really is. I mean, I've never nodded off riding a motorcycle in my life, but we both did it on many occasions, especially in the last half of the tour.
I was carrying a small empty bottle. One of the mornings I'd have a a Pedialyte mix in it. Would finish that mid-morning. In the afternoon, when I was getting tired and nodding off, I would put an instant coffee in there, fill it up with water out of my backpack, and kill the damn thing just so I could get another hour or two out of the day. And it was, I've never done anything like that in my life. I just, it's tough.
I've fallen asleep on my motorcycle riding the Tour of Idaho before, and it's the only time I've ever done it. And anybody that says you cannot fall asleep on a dirt bike, I got news for you. I've done it several times. And it's always in that stretch going into Wallace, too. It's always somewhere along through there. I'm so exhausted that's where it catches up with me. So these poor guys,
on the transfer sections.
I still have to apologize for these guys. I'm still trying to figure out a way to make it up to them because they had made arrangements with a U-Haul dealer in Sandpoint, if I'm not mistaken, right? To get a U-Haul to come back down here. Yeah. Well, it's Sandpoint, Idaho. What can I say? There's a lot of aluminum, I think, in the drinking water up there. And I guess the U-Haul place closed, and they didn't find out about it until they kind of got there that there was not going to be any U-Haul. So they called me and asked me to come get them. And what those guys didn't know was that I was right in the middle of suffering from kidney stones. I had a golf ball sized kidney stone that had to be broken up with a lithotripsy this year. Took 3 treatments. And the day I came to get them was the sickest I have ever been in my entire life. And these poor guys would get in the truck, and all they wanted was just to get something to eat, ride in the truck, and they get a sandwich, and the smell of that sandwich would make me even more. I love you guys to death. I didn't want to make the ride back miserable, but I have never been that sick in my life.
Yeah, you're a little peaking.
And then the best part is Jensen's talking to us on the phone, and he goes, you remember that? Jensen calls. He goes, yeah, I had to quit. And I'm at this gas station. I said, yeah, we're looking at you. We drove up just as he pulled into the gas station. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that guy his hands were like ice. I really felt for him because that's the way we felt in 18. It's not a fun feeling, but he made the right call.
Yeah, and the Tour of Idaho is not going anywhere. He lives here.
Yeah,
he'll be able to come back, and he will come back because JJ, he's got the bug. He's like all of us. Once it gets a hold of you, man, it's kind of hard to let go, and that's one of the reasons I like changing it up every year because it gives people a reason to come back, even though they've been successful. Like hopefully you guys will come back in a couple of years, and when the route's changed a little bit, and you'll give her another go. So we're almost done here. We're way over time, but I really appreciate you guys spending the time to tell your story tonight. People don't even know yet how much of a favor you all have done them talking about your preparation and your 2 tours. So let's wrap it up in like the next 5 minutes or so. Is there anything else you want to tell everybody that's out there that's going to give it a go in 2021 or 2022 or anytime in the next few years?
Yeah, if you're up for a really, really tough adventure, man, and you like motorcycles a whole lot, go for it. Just do yourself a favor and plan. Because, it's a lot of money to go out there and do that. And to fail really sucks, especially, if it comes down to, lack of preparation.
Yeah. And even if you do make it deep into it, pat yourself on the back. You've done well. It's hard. Yeah. And, even Martin has said, there's folks, hey, at least you tried. There's a lot of people who just talk about it, never even try it. And other people say they did it, but really didn't. So, it's, you got to do it for yourself. You can't do it for your buddy. You can't do it for Martin. You got to do it for yourself.
There you go.
Yeah.
Listen, I really appreciate you guys spending. I know it's late for you guys. It's getting on 10 o'clock back there in Kentucky. So on behalf of the entire tour community, thank you very much for spending your evening with us. Congratulations again. What is it, 77 and 78? Is that who I'm talking to here? 77, 78. Good job. We're all happy as heck that you guys came back this year. It was great to watch you run. It was probably, in terms of navigation errors, the cleanest run of the year. I didn't really see anything. You guys finished with, I think, 1 or 2 points to spare, so there wasn't any issues there. You deserved a better shuttle ride back than you got, but I'll make it up to you sometime down the road.
Oh, that's all right. Thanks for having us and putting the tour on, you and all the volunteers along the route. It's even after doing the Kentucky Adventure Tour, I just can't fathom how all this comes together every single year, because I know there's a lot of work every year to keep those trails cleaned up and open.
Indeed.
Yeah, there's people all over the state that jump on that stuff, and you know what? Some of them don't even ride motorcycles. There's guys out there on horseback sawing stuff for us. It's the darndest thing in the world.
Yeah, some of those avalanche areas that they cut through just boggles my mind how it's even possible to cut that out.
Yeah.
Kent, you got anything else to say, brother?
That's it.
All right.
Good. We'll sign
Thanks
off.
a lot again for joining us. Thanks all of you who came in tonight. I'm going to take these guys off here. We'll be back next week, next Monday night, 7 o'clock. I'll come up with a guest the next day or so. Once again, a bunch of teams that have finished in the last couple of years have responded that they'd like to be on the show. So I'll have a guest scheduled for next week by sometime tomorrow, Wednesday at the latest, and I'll put up the announcement. Thanks again for spending a little over an hour with us this evening. I hope you found it enjoyable and useful, and be seeing you. Thanks, guys.